Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave with Evil Eye Games. Today we're going to continue on with our third-person cover shooter. There are a few things I'd like to address before I carry on with the series, so I'm going to clean up a couple minor portions that will affect gameplay a bit. And to demonstrate what we're going to take a look at today, I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And one thing you'll notice is if you pay close attention to the character's left hand, is that it doesn't stay exactly seated on the weapon. And we're going to take a look into that. We're going to use IK, or inverse kinematics, to correct the hand positioning on the weapon. Second, if our player gets into cover, we're at a point where we can't fire the weapon, but we still have our crosshair available to us. And I want to go ahead and hide the crosshair when we can't shoot. I'd also like to take care of what happens when our character looks behind us. Right now, if we aim over cover and we rotate to the left, once we hit the 90-degree mark, our character just kind of stops, and he doesn't pivot or do anything at firing behind us. And lastly, when our character sprints, we have the ability to aim still and get our FOV change. So first, to take care of the hand position on the weapon, we're going to go into our characters folder in our player character, and we're going to open up our AniBP. Now from our state machine here, I'm going to actually back up and go to our overall anim graph. And we have our state machine that's plugged into our final animation pose. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag off of our state machine here, and we're going to search for 2-bone IK. It doesn't seem to be showing. You're going to have to uncheck context sensitive, and we'll put our 2-bone IK in place. And you'll notice that it does a local to component conversion right here. And if we connect our 2-bone IK up to the final animation pose, it's going to reconvert that from a component to a local. And then we're going to have to go ahead and set up our 2-bone IK. So after selecting our 2-bone IK down in our details panel here, there's going to be several settings that we can set up. Now, the bone that we want to adjust is going to be our left hand, which is hand_L. So for IK bone, we want to select hand L. And then for the effector location space here, I want to set this to bone space. And then under end effector here, there's the effector bone space name. This is going to be the bone that it's in relation to. So I'm going to set this to the hand_R, which is going to be the right hand bone. So you're going to want to double check your skeleton and make sure that the bone name is exactly the same, otherwise it won't work. And then under joint target here, I want to set this component space for the joint target location space. I want to actually set this to bone space, and it'll bring up a new option at the top, the joint target bone space name. And I'm going to set this to the bone that precedes the hand that we're adjusting. So if we take a look at the skeleton and we find our hand R, the next bone up on the tree is going to be the lower arm. So we're going to set this to our lower arm _L. And then I'm going to go ahead and compile this. And if we see in our preview here, what it has done is it's taken our left hand and fixed it to our right hand. And that's what the IK is doing, is it's moving this hand in relation to the hand that we set it to. So at this point, we're going to have to go and drag out our hand and more finitely position it. And you just want to kind of knock this hand into position, put it appropriately on the weapon. And this is going to be a much more final position. So you're going to want to be just about as accurate as you can be with this. So that looks pretty good to me. So we're going to go ahead and compile and save. And then if we hit play and we move around with our weapon, you'll notice that the hand doesn't jiggle or move around. It does look like it could use some adjustment. One thing to note is that the preview may not match identically to the actual in-game, so that is something to pay attention to. So I'm just going to take this hand and drag it over a little bit more, and we'll try that out. And that looks pretty good to me. If we take cover, his hand's going to stay on the weapon pretty statically. So I'll just compile and save, and we'll close our player anim BP for now. Next, I'm going to go ahead and take away our ability to aim while we're sprinting. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open up the player controller. And in our aim button here, we're just going to grab this and drag it over. And then in our pressed, we're going to put in a branch. And we'll connect our true to set as aiming. And then we're going to get our is sprinting. And then we want this to be true when is sprinting is false. So I'll put a not operator in place. And we'll connect that up to the condition. And we'll go ahead and compile and save. And we can test it out by hitting play. So if I start sprinting and I hit the aim button, I'm not able to aim. Now the other thing you'll notice is that if we have the aim button held down and we hit sprint, it will continue to aim. So to fix this, we're simply going to go up to our sprint button here. And when we set sprinting to true, we're going to want to also go ahead and set is aiming to false. And what we do with our aim button is we set the FOV based on whether we're aiming. So all we're going to have to do here is we're going to insert a branch at the end of our chain here. And the condition is going to be if we are sprinting. So I'm going to grab our is sprinting variable here, and I'm going to drag it into our condition. And then if we are sprinting, we want to go ahead and set the FOV. Which is on our player character, so we're going to have to grab a reference to our player character, which there is one down here. So we're going to drag off of our player character, and we're going to get set FOV. And we want it to set is aiming to false. So at this point, we'll go ahead and compile and save, and let's test it out. So if I'm aiming and I hit sprint, our character then stops aiming, and I can't aim again until we stop sprinting. And we're going to be done with our player controller, so I'm going to go ahead, compile and save, and close out of here. And the next thing we want to address is hiding the crosshairs when we can't fire. So we're going to go ahead and open up our 3P player character. Set can fire is what ends up triggering whether or not we can fire the weapon or not. So every time we want to set the weapon to not be able to fire, set can fire at some point is called. So we can use this to call something in order to get the crosshairs on the main display to either show or hide. And in order to do this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new event dispatcher. And I'm going to call this show hide crosshairs. And then with the event dispatcher, I'm going to add one new input. And it's going to be a Boolean. And we're going to call this show crosshairs. And then in the event of our set can fire, we're going to go ahead and drag out and call our show hide crosshair. And so what I'm going to do to make this really simple is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this branch off to a little bit. and we're going to drag our show hide crosshair dispatcher in place. And then for show crosshairs, we want to show the crosshairs when canfire is true. So we'll simply drag canfire into our show crosshairs. And so now I'm going to just go ahead and compile and save. And now we need to go ahead and actually do something with this dispatcher. So I'm going to close out of our player character. And we're going to go into our HUD and open up our gameplay widget. And we'll go into the graph. And at the very beginning here, we go ahead and we grab our player character. And we end up binding our overheat dispatcher and our overheat percent dispatcher at the very beginning. So we can drag off our player character here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to search for that show hide crosshairs dispatcher. And we want to bind event. We'll go ahead and connect that up. And then we're going to have to go ahead and actually bind an event to this. So we're going to drag off of our event. We're going to search for a custom event. And I'm going to call this show hide crosshairs. And now what we're going to want to do is get references to our crosshairs. So I will drag out each one of our crosshair images. The left, right, down, and up. And we're going to want to go ahead and set the visibility. And we're going to want to do it for each one of our crosshairs. And I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this again. And we're going to put a branch in after our show hide crosshair event. And we'll connect our branch and the show crosshairs condition. And then we just want to make sure we hook up the targets to each one of these set visibilities. And then once we have that hooked up, we can connect our true into one chain and our false into the other. Now in the event that we want to show the crosshairs, the true, we want all of the top set visibilities set to visible. And for the bottom set, we want them all set to hidden. And I'm going to go ahead and put a comment box around this. We'll call it show hide crosshairs. And we'll go ahead and compile and save. And we'll hit play. So if we get up to cover and we take cover, it hides our crosshairs from us. When I go ahead and aim, once we're able to fire again, it will show our crosshairs. And then if we go ahead and sprint, it'll once again hide our crosshairs. And when we stop sprinting, our crosshairs will reappear once we can fire. So we can go ahead, compile and save, and close out of our gameplay widget. And lastly, I'm going to handle how we deal with looking backwards from when we're in cover. Now, I've been playing around with this a whole lot, and I've been running into a couple of roadblocks because of the way root animation works and the animations that are available. I'm having some issues with rotating the character. When a character rotates, it likes to rotate in a clockwise fashion all the time. And as yet, I have not seen any particular way to rotate our character in a specific direction. So this is becoming a very big issue when trying to create a more dynamic shooting out of cover from behind. So for the meantime, I'm going to put in a more simplistic approach where if we end up aiming when we're looking backwards, it's going to actually take our character out of cover. Now, this isn't going to harm what I particularly have in mind for the game. I'm planning on having more of a corridor-like shooter with linear gameplay. So the player, for the most part, is going to be going from point A to point B, and the enemies are going to be coming from in front of him. There are a couple of sections, however, that I would like to have where the player ends up being in a more open area. But for now, in testing purposes, until I get something better worked out, we're just going to go ahead and set it up so that when the character is aiming and he exceeds his front 180-degree arc, he will pop out of cover. So we're going to go into our player character again and open up our player anim BP. And we're going to go into our state machine. And first I'm simply going to go into the transition rule from our cover aim to our cover aim to idle. So I'm going to open up this transition here. And then for the conditions here, I want to go ahead and grab our player aim yaw. And we want to check against this to see if it is less than negative 90 degrees. So I'll set it to negative 90. And then we also want to check to see if it's greater than a positive 90, which is our front 180-degree firing arc. And then I'm just going to add 2 more pins to our OR, and I'm going to plug these in. And we're going to go back to our state machine. And the next transition I'm going to open is our cover idle to cover to idle, which over here is our basic cover idle state when we transition out to our rifle walk. So from cover idle to cover to idle, I'm going to open up that transition. And right now we're just checking our move forward and whether or not we're taking cover. And for this, I want to go ahead and grab our is aiming variable. And I want to grab our player aim yaw. And once again, we want to check with the player aim yaw if it is less than negative 90 or if it's greater than a positive 90. And we only want this to take effect when we are aiming. So from our player aim yaws, we're going to drag out an OR, and we're going to connect these two together. And we want this to take effect when is aiming is also set. So from is aiming, I'm going to drag out and get a and. And we're going to plug our OR into our and. And then finally, I'm going to add a new pin to our OR that we originally had in place here. And I'm going to plug our and into that OR. And one last thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go back to the event graph. And where we clamp the angles in our aim offset, we clamped our yaw to a negative 90 and a positive 90. So we want to go ahead and change this minimum angle degree to a negative 179 and the max angle degree to a 180. So I'm just going to go ahead and compile and save. And we'll hit play. And we'll go ahead and test it out. So if my player takes cover and I aim over the cover and I rotate past our horizontal negative 90 degree to the left here, we continue rotating with it. And if I stop aiming, our player is out of cover. Same thing if I aim and I rotate over to the right, our player is now out of cover. And lastly, if I take cover and I look behind us and I go ahead and aim, our character pops up out of cover. Now there is a little bit of jerkiness with the animations. This particularly has to do with the character setting his direction after we pop out of cover, because it's setting the case where our character is going to start using our controller yaw. And when that happens, it's going to rotate our character around, and it is going to create these poppy little weird glitches when we end up rotating outside of our front 180 degree mark. This is something I'm going to continue working on to see if I can find a better solution to this. And that's going to conclude today's video. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. And thanks for watching.